out of the Eastwood stable. Range of punching from the little American. Finding the very busy southpaw style of Johnson just difficult enough. Johnson seems to have stepped up the pace considerably in the second round. From Johnson. And Wenton very much in the defensive in this second round from this tough little bundle from Washington. More of a slap, the right hand that time from Johnson. Oh, great right hand from Wenton, and Johnson's knees buckled, and the American visitor had to hold on. About a minute to go in this round, and Johnson, having put together a nice little series of attacks, suddenly walked onto a right hand, and the whole pattern of that round changed. Johnson's mouth now just open. He's breathing fairly heavily. That took a bit out of him. That was a good right hand from Wenton. Half a minute to go. And Wenton now backpedaling, it seems, once again. Ending to the second round, but plenty of action right in the middle of it. Mark Johnson under a little bit of pressure, having put together a nice little string of attacks, and then all of a sudden got caught by a very good right hand. But the 18-year-old has got a swelling underneath his eye, and the eye looking not terribly serious, but they're just trying to reduce that swelling. So it was Johnson who did a lot of very good work, and then went and caught him with that slicing right hand, and the American teenager did remarkably well to survive that. Barney Wilson came straight in, but survive it he did, and almost certainly it was that right hand punch that caused the swelling underneath the left eye of Mark Too Sharp Johnson.
Second time. Line 3.
This has turned out to be a very good bantamweight contest. And just the sort of contest that Richie Wenton needs. Two good bantamweights, as Barney Eastwood in his charge, Wenton and the Belfast boxer John Lowy. Johnson's corner encouraging their man to come forward all the time. Certainly Johnson hasn't stood his ground and waited for Wenton to come to him. apart from that very good right hand in the second, Winton hasn't done anything much except jab out quite nicely with the left. Winton has fought twice in his hometown of Kirby, Liverpool, and twice here in Belfast. This is his first time in the King's Hall, his other two contests being in the smaller Ulster Hall in the city centre. The left-hand side of Winton's face starting to redden, so Mark Johnson has obviously got home. Good jabbing, a couple of good jabs by Winton, and a adroit use of the forearm to push the smaller, lighter American away from him. Didn't quite contact with that right the way he did in the second. Final bit of pressure from Winton at the end of this round. That's Richie Winton, been a professional since December of 1988. The second round stoppage of Miguel Matthews in Kirby, and came to Belfast in January of last year and had a points win over 4 rounds against former Ulster and Irish amateur champion Sean Casey. And then last December, his third fight was back in Kirby again, when he defeated the former Scottish amateur champion Joe Mullen from Irvine. And then a month ago it was the Panamanian Ariel Cordova who was defeated over 6 rounds in points. So just 4 contests in about 15 months of professional boxing, and I think he would like to be a lot more active.
Second time. Final round.
Fourth and final round then, this bantamweight contest. Richie Winton from Liverpool, and the stars and stripes being worn with considerable pride by Mark Johnson from Washington, D.C. Winton taller, possessed of greater reach, and 2.5 pounds heavier. As apart from a good attack in the second round, where Johnson put him under a bit of pressure, looked fairly well in command. Once again, Johnson's corner being fairly vociferous, urging the man to come forward. Right hand in there, Winton, but took one himself, and not a bad left from Liverpudlian. A minute to go to the end of this 4-round bantamweight contest. The shorts of Johnson starting to drop down a little bit. Again, a good right from Winton. That's another very good right from Winton. A little short, snappy one this time. And Johnson took it right in the middle of his face, and it's brought a trickle of blood from the nose of the American, who is starting to wobble. And Johnson's hands dropping a little. About 10 seconds to go. And Winton looking impressive. Oh, great right hand again. Johnson starting to wobble, and the bell will save him. And the Dominion of American grin, shakes his head, but Barney Wilson raises the hand of Richie Winton. So the older brother of Nigel has made it 5 wins out of 5, 3 points, 2 inside the distance. And Richie Winton is getting more and more impressive all the time. The first contest for the man in the blue trunk to the gold trim, the Belfast southpaw Sam Story, since his first successful defence of his British super middleweight title against another Belfast man, Noel McGee. That was last November. His opponent tonight, the man who's being used as a warm-up fight for his next defence against James Cook, is from Merthyr in Wales, Simon Collins, the 23-year-old. He's 3 years younger than Sam Story. Story, former Ulster and Irish amateur middleweight champion, and a man whose career has really come on in the last couple of years, culminating in taking the first ever British super middleweight title. And he had a points win over 12 rounds in Belfast last September against Croydon's Tony Burke out in the Ulster Hall. So Story in the dark blue and gold, and Simon Collins in very pale pink. Collins' 21st professional fight. He's won 6, drawn 3, lost 10, and one of them was declared a no contest. One stage Story didn't really look as if he was going to fulfill his amateur promise, but an increased training regime and a lot more discipline in the last year have certainly paid off for a very likable local boxer. Story at least 3 inches taller and enjoying a reach advantage. Nice and crisp by Story, working behind that southpaw jab. And Story, bearing in mind his British title defence against James Cook in the next month, will want to pace himself. Story varying it from body and then to head with the right hand, and again. And there's Sam Story, now 26, first professional fight as long ago as December 1985. Took the vacant All-Ireland middleweight title in April of 1987 against one of his old amateur rivals, Rocky McGran, also from Belfast. And interestingly, the only person to defeat him was also called Collins, but that was Steve Collins, who took that All-Ireland title from him in Boston, the only time that Sam as a professional has moved outside these islands. That was in March of 1988. But back he came, and he's now the reigning British super middleweight champion, Belfast Sam Story. Quick look at Simon Collins, 23-year-old from Merthyr. Been fairly busy. The contest in Switzerland last month, lost to Roland Eriksson.
Second time. 1-2.
Sam Story, a pretty good crowd pleaser here in Belfast, especially now that he's the reigning British champion. Collins at this stage looking at a relatively easy target. He's fairly square and doesn't move around a lot, and Story is finding him not too difficult to hit. Story, the son of one of the best amateur coaches in Ireland for a long time, Jerry Story, who's coached both the Northern Ireland Commonwealth Games team and the Irish Olympic Games teams in his time. First time we've really seen the left from Story, and that made a good contact. Collins just suddenly a little bit of an explosion in a right hand, which almost got Story. Story covering up well to the body. Oh, there's a little right hand, and it seemed to catch his man just on the temple, and Collins all of a sudden, from looking relatively steady, that seemed to stagger him completely, and Story followed it up. Well, that seemed really quite innocuous, that first right hand, but it did catch Collins, and as a left has caught him, and Story, from a fairly measured performance, has now suddenly found the range and the power, and if I'm not too mistaken, the scent of victory is in the nostrils of Sam Story. Collins' gum shield has come out. Barney Wilson is thrown into the Welshman's corner. Collins doing well to cover up, and Story perhaps wanting a little bit more out of this. Is not looking all that terribly urgent about finishing it off. A few seconds to go, and there's the bell, and a pretty sharp and precise finish to that round by Sam Story. And it really looked like nothing at all. It seemed a fairly straightforward little punch to the head, and all of a sudden Simon Collins really wobbled and went backwards. There he is, the bearded man from Merthyr, the 23-year-old, just last month. Well, there it was, and Story, having caught him once, the right finished it up, and it was the left that put him down. So Rod, a very quiet start, Rod Douglas, very quiet start, and Sam Story suddenly exploding into life.
That's right, he's come on well, but Collins is asking for it, where he's a little bit static. He should be bobbing and weaving a bit more and throwing some punches back, but he's not replying at all. so he's asking for it.
Second time. Round 3.
Barney Wilson has asked for, I think it's a lot of water in the corner of Simon Collins to be mopped up. Quite a pool of water underneath where the Welshman was sitting. And Barney Wilson obviously does a bit of housekeeping. Has mopped that up very nicely indeed. So Story, as Rod Douglas was saying, finding Collins a relatively easy target, and Collins perhaps just realizing how easy he has been to hit, might just try to step it up himself. But he really is intent or content, it seems, just to hide behind the gloves and the forearms. Story needs a real confidence booster before his British super middleweight title defense against James Cook. Story did get through with the left. Doesn't seem to be too bothered by anything that Collins has got. There's that right again. And the gum shield of Collins out once again on the canvas. Chopping right from Story. Looking very confident. Half a minute to go. Story comfortably ahead. And seems to have taken a bit of a rest in this round. Story hasn't really done as much work as he did in the second. Sam Story looking very, very comfortable and very, very content. Barney Eastwood in the corner. Paddy Brown there as well. Great contest last November against another former Irish amateur champion, Noel McGee, who came down from light heavy to super middle to challenge Story. Big sellout it was in Belfast, meeting of two local men. And Story, a very comfortable winner. Having lost the first round, went through and put up a superb performance against McGee, and the contest was stopped in the 9th at Story's first defence of his British title.
Second time. Round 4.
Having taken a breather in the third, one wonders, will Sam Story just inject a little pace and a little venom into things in the fourth? Certainly Simon Collins is not going to get any more difficult to hit. left and then a right. Become a little bit too static, perhaps. He's not bouncing up and down on the toes at all. We've seen very little of the left hand of Story. It's all been rights. Maybe being a little bit too casual. He's not as accurate as I'm sure he would want. Now Collins putting the occasional little spurt in. It's better from Story. Barney Eastwood in the corner. Oh yes, well, come on then. If that's all you can do, says Mr. Collins, I can take that. But that, generally speaking, is a sign of a boxer who has been affected by a punch. And it's generally a little piece of bravado. Better from the Story. Difficult enough for Story to get through that defence of Collins. It's only really happened once. Now in the second round. Last couple of seconds. And again, I think Rod Douglas around to Sam's Story, but he needs to probably vary things a little bit more.
That's right. Sam's winning the fight quite comfortably, but in that situation, your concentration seems to wander a little bit. Got caught with a nice little left-right by Collins, and that brought him back to again. Started boxing nicely again.
And there's a cut on the cheekbone of Sam Story. He has been known to bleed in the past, nothing terribly serious, but he needs to step it up, and he occasionally just lapses back into the old amateur habit of letting the guard drop down a little bit, and he's got a not terribly serious, but nevertheless a very slight nick on his left cheekbone. It's not going to affect him in any way, but maybe it might just spur him into stepping up the pace a little, knowing that he has that cut, and that's the last thing he'll certainly want, bearing in mind his British title defence in the not too distant future.
Second side.
Start of the fifth, and Sam Story in the blue and the gold. A little nick on his left cheekbone, and they just start to pick up the pace.